it's with pleasure that I introduce our Cloud Salon guest. Today's presentation is going to be by Pau Garcia, who is the founder and director of the agency that will be presented to today. So you're going to get a deep dive into the work. And Pau is also a co-director of the Masters in Design. And so he is dialing in, I think, from Barcelona. Is that correct?
No, today I'm in New York, actually.
Oh, here in our time zone. So thanks so much for we could have had you here on campus, but Zoom will have to suffice today. So it's with pleasure that I invite you to take over the screen and tell us about the work you've been doing.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Dave. Can you see my screen well?
Yes.
Okay. Well, thanks for the invitation, and today we'll try to explain a bit the work we have been doing at Domestic Data Streamers. You call it an agency, and sometimes we act as an agency. We still are very much confused about what we are. We don't know if we are a studio, we are an art community, or an agency. And this lack of definition, actually, it's quite of an advantage depending on the kind of work you do. In our case, is a clear advantage. Today I will be specifically talking about our work in data visualization and data experiences and the relationships that we have created through these last 10 years of work. Our project started in 2013, and it started in the street of Barcelona. We were doing a kind of an interactive graffiti in the middle of the street, taking information from the people and trying to make a visualization of the optimism and pessimism in the streets for 24 hours. Right? And since that first visualization, like, the project has evolved a lot. We are now a team of 25 people coming from very different disciplines, from artists, designers, coders, journalists, or data scientists. And we are specifically focused in the quest and in the research of understanding the ways and the languages in which data manifests itself. And whenever we talk about data, like, it's such an ubiquitous and kind of abstract thing, right? If you go to the definition of data, you will see this description: facts and statistics collected together for reference or analysis. That I truly think this is the worst definition ever. Like, this is not properly a definition of anything. And whenever you see data represented, mostly is in things like this: the cost of corruption in Europe up to 781.64 billion lost annually. And I don't know if you have a billion in your bank account. I don't. So for me, obviously, it's quite complex to understand the figures and the size of this reality and the information that at the end is hidden and an enormous amount of layers of systematic violence. And when we talk about economics and data on economics, this is a complex thing. But whenever we are talking about human lives, this is even worse, because we are relating to these humans' lives through numbers and actually very symbolic representations of reality, because at the end, behind these numbers, behind these headlines in the media outlets, there are all these realities that are very human and natural realities that affect us in a lot of different ways we experience human life, right? And if you go to the ways we have historically developed to actually illustrate and show information, you can see that we have not evolved that much in the last 3 centuries, right? If you go to one of the first infographics here at the end of the 18th century from William Playfair, you will see an infographic that is not so different from the infographics we do today. That at the end, these are like the maximum ways we have somehow come to understand information design and data representation. And we truly believe that if we put on a scale, for once, the amount of data that we have to actually deal with in just one day, today, and 300 years ago, the evolution of this weight of the weight of the information that we have to handle is much bigger than the tools that we have evolved to actually digest this information. So there is actually a clear imbalance between our tools to read, understand, and digest information and the amount of information that we are challenged with the goal to actually understand. And this creates a lot of things, but one of the problems that we can see already is the lack of empathy. If you don't understand something, you cannot even get angry at it. You cannot even really deal with it and challenge it. And what comes with a lack of empathy, a lack of emotion, if you don't care about something, you will not do anything to change it, right? If you don't get angry about the cost of corruption, you will not do anything to actually come to an end to this corruption, right? So this is a reality that is surrounding all these very complex systems of information, abstract systems of information that we have to deal with in our everyday life. And it goes to all the fields, from the most scientific ones to the most social ones. And there is this sentence that is quite hard, that says, one death is a tragedy, a million deaths is just a statistic. It was said by Joseph Stalin, that was quite an expert in killing people. And he actually was pointing out a reality that we have seen in our own skin. We know that whenever we see on a media stream, the amount of people found dead in a war, it's just a number. It's just a number. We don't see the eyes of these people. We don't see the families. We don't see the relationships, the cultural that is lost through that. Whenever I'm talking about information and data, the focus of our work and our studio is specifically on that very human part of it. And this concept can be represented not in such a dramatic scale, but in all kind of very much different scales. I will give you an example of a story that I found on the internet a few years ago. I was preparing this exhibition on the impact that video games are having in our society. And I was looking, of course, for the video games that I used to play as a kid. One of these video games was Calling Magra Rally. It was a very classic video game of races and cars. And I was looking on the comment section of one YouTube video on Calling Magra Rally, and I found this user that was actually telling his story, his personal story with the video game. And he was telling, he was writing that when he was 8 years old, his parents actually, as a present for Christmas, gave him Calling Magra Rally, and he started to play a lot, and his father actually played a lot with him. It was kind of a bonding moment for both of them. And within this moment, he realized that his father was a bit competitive because he always wanted to win, and he actually always win. And sadly, when he was over 11 years old, his father passed from cancer. And because playing to this video game reminded him a lot to his father, he stopped playing it. And it was not until almost 20 years later that one day he came back to his mother's place, and he was kind of mingling, tinkering with the old things that he had in the closet, and he found the Calling Magra Rally, and he started to play again. And he was playing to this video game, and unexpectedly he found something in the video game. In one of the races, he found this ghost card. This is a very classic thing from the video games from that time, at least, and that was that whenever you did your best lap, that will be recorded in a kind of simulation of your car in your best lap, and you will be racing against yourself. The thing is that, of course, this car was his father, because it was his father who was playing and winning most of the times. So for a couple of weeks, he was saying that he started to play 20 years later with his father in this video game. And what it's truly emotive and really emotional for me, it's that no one from Calling Magra Rally, neither Xbox or PlayStation, neither of the designers that created this universe thought of this as a possibility. And truly what I think is interesting is that at the very end, this is a manifestation of data. This is another way that data manifests itself. And whenever we talk about information and information design, I always try to point to these kind of experiences, understanding that the experiences and the way we experience information doesn't need to be through charts. It doesn't need to be through the manifestation of abstract context. It could be through experiences, through simulations of experiences, for example. And that's why we most of the time talk about what we call info experiences instead of infographics, right? And on that same note, a realization that we had was that the concept that we are only able to connect something and to truly understand it when we can relate it to something that we already know, that is already in our minds. And that's mostly the power of metaphors, or the power of using things that are very domestic, very close to our daily life. And that's what we try to do in most of the project. So I will give today 2 examples of how we can transform information and data design into something that is more experiential. The first is the project Samples. Is a project that we did almost in 2015. So it's quite an old project, but still today I think it's still relevant. And we were asked by the people from the Contemporary Art Center in Barcelona to actually do something that was very complex, that was solve the question of how could we quantify the impact of artworks towards an audience, right? So the curators said, well, we have this amazing feedback from the audience, and other curators come from to our exhibitions, and they tell us how they felt and what was the best part and what was the worst, and we can use that to learn, but we never have quantitative information for the exhibition, just the amount of people that have come. And they ask us, can we quantify that? And of course, like, quantifying the impact of an artwork is very complex, because artworks are inherently subjective, at least in the way we experience them and we understand them, as we all come from different places. But what we could do is something a bit different, that was actually track the attention that the artworks created on the audience. So we started to place cameras around the exhibition space, and we started to track the amount of time that people spent in front of one artwork or the other. And with that information, we had already solved kind of that problem, but we were curious and we were thinking, okay, how we could actually amp this information, this data that we are actually gathering, in a transparent manner. We could show it to everyone, to all the audience, right? At the very end, it was a Google Analytics of an exhibition, of a physical space. And we decided that the best way to visualize this kind of information, that was attention, but at the same time, it was the amount of seconds that people spend in front of an artwork, was to transform it into a sun clock, right? And that was the first drawing that we did on the whole idea, and that's how we sold the idea to the creators. From there, we started to prototype like different ways we could create like these sun clocks and understand like the complexities of it, because of course sun is not always regular, because we have to do something that is really connected to the amount of seconds. If there is 2 people in front of an artwork, is the double of seconds, so it needs to stay more time, and like program like the whole system so it will be like quite relevant and secure, and visualize specifically the amount of time that people was spending there. So we decided to place these sun clocks at the very end of the exhibition, so the people will not realize about the attention span of different artworks until the very end. And when the people arrived there at this kind of visualization of sun clocks, what we realized is that they were coming back again to see mainly the artwork that was already most seen, right? So it was kind of making a retro feedback effect. When the people arrived, they saw, okay, this is the artwork that actually keeps more the attention of people. Let's go again, because maybe there is something that we have missed. And because they went back there, there was more sun being released. And this is something, this is a concept that later on has been actually used a lot in social media, in Instagram and TikTok and Facebook. The amount of likes, the amount of shares, the amount of interactions and attention that actually is visible makes and defines the content in a different way, makes the people see the reality that they are seeing in a different manner, right? And I remember the day of the opening that I was doing like a whole tour with my parents, like showing the whole place. And in one of the artworks, I saw like this guy all in black, like really serious, like watching the artwork. And then after almost like 40 minutes, I went and I did another tour with a couple of friends, and he was still there. And I asked him, "Are you feeling all right? Is everything okay?" And he told me, yes, I'm good. The problem is that no one is spending that much time in this artwork, and I really like it. So I want to give my time to it. And at that point, I realized that just by creating a system of visualization, you could somehow create even empathy towards an object, towards an inanimate object. And of course, this is an anecdote. This is just one person. But if just one person like changed his relationship towards an artwork, imagine what we could do if we start to like create bridges of empathy towards people. And this brings to this idea that whenever we are creating systems of communication, it's very important to have in mind the component of the experience, of the whole experience, not only the visual component, not only the acoustic component, not only the temperature component, but like the whole experience as a theater play. And that's when we started to actually create performatic data visualizations, understanding that information was something that needed sometimes to be performed, that needed to be lived through. And the last example I wanted to show on that sense came from a briefing from UNICEF during the United Nations General Assembly. That is this like big meeting that is hosted here in New York, and people from 371 countries come over and decide like the next decisions on the Sustainable Development Goals. And it's a bit like the to-do list of each country and a global deal on these topics, right? And UNICEF for a very long time, they have been actually pointing out a very big problematic that some countries didn't have a lot of information on education and childhood, on health and childhood. And this was very problematic because they were actually saying, okay, we commit to do these changes and create these policies that will impact positively our population, but they didn't have any KPI, any indicator to actually determine if the policies that they were actually creating and doing were having a positive impact on population, and specifically on the very much vulnerable population that are kids and children. And they said, well, we have been doing reports for a very long time, but this is not enough. We need to create something that will visualize not the information that we have, but the gaps of information, the lack of information, and the importance to address this lack of information. And of course, this was like a very complex brief to solve. But we said, well, our target audience at that time, it was the last year of Obama in the United States. The General Assembly secretary was Ban Ki-moon, and we had to actually develop an installation for these people to create a data performance for these people. So it was kind of a surreal for us, for a small studio from Barcelona, to create an installation for such high-level decision makers around the world. So we decided to do an idea that could be at the same level of surrealism. And this idea was to create a time machine, right? And the whole idea was, let's build a time machine so we can bring all these politicians back to their childhood and realize about the importance of their own data in the future. And that's what we did. We rented like this warehouse in New Jersey where we started to build up this kind of box. And it was a box actually created to isolate anyone. So we wanted this high-level politician and decision makers be totally isolated, with no press, with no security, with no advisors, just them alone in a box, in silence, without any capability of connecting with anyone, without any input, acoustic input, and with any visual input. right? So we created this very dark box where you will enter. We like actually surrounded the box with these mirrors around, and we bined this is a time machine, because of course we don't know what that time machine looks like, so we had to be a bit obvious on that. And this is how it looked and the hall of the United Nations, the General Assembly. And this is like the hall that you encounter right before entering to the United Nations General Assembly, like the big meeting room. And from there, we got in the list over 220 high-level decision makers, from ambassadors to ministers to presidents from different countries, and they will have between 12 and 15 minutes for the whole experience. And when they get in, they will have
I am a time machine.
They will have this small light over there that will start to talk with them, right? And we'll start to ask questions. And the first question was, how secure did you feel during your childhood? And you had like this slider where you could actually say, I felt very safe, or I felt very unsafe. And depending on where you were placing the slider, you will start to listen a song. And if you were answering, I felt very safe, we were using a major scale of a song that is more happy, it's more joyful. And if it was something that was more like, I was not feeling so safe, you will hear a more like minor scale. So it was more melancholic, right? And with each answer and each interaction that you had a new sound integrated into the space, right? And it was somehow creating a song specifically made for you. We had this first moment where you will be asked to place your hand in this lead surface, and we were taking the heartbeat of everyone and then translating the heartbeat into the beat of the song, right? So you will be able to see and listen 360 vibration and the bass of your heartbeat augmented, right? And then we had other questions like, what did you want to be when you grow up? So for example, Obama, in his case, he said astronaut. And you could hear in his song, 3, 2, 1, ignition. And then there were moments that they had to draw something that they used to draw as a kid. And with each line that they draw, there was a new note. And each color that they used, there was a new note too. And there was a moment in the whole experience when like the whole song come together and you were like listening to it, and it was actually a song specifically made for you, like with all your data, with all your answers. And then at that point there was a total silence, like the song breaks, and the voice that had been like accompanying you said, well, that was the song of your childhood, but still there are a lot of childhoods that are in silence, and it is in your hands to change that, right? And a contract was printed, a contract between, in this case, Obama, President of the United States, and Obama as a kid of 6-year-old, that his first love was Maggie, that he wanted to be an astronaut, and he had to sign it both as president, and the other part was signed as his drawing as a kid. And we did so because we wanted to actually have like a public exhibition of commitments from commitment contracts from all these politicians. So something that the press actually could go there and see who was committing to actually address the problem of information and the gaps of information, right? And it was like really like, I think one of the most crazy moments in my life to see the Secretary General of the United Nations introduce a time machine at the United Nations and explain like the impact of it. Over 200 people passed by, and like the impact you could see and on the faces and the amount of people that wanted to participate was huge. And at the same time, it was like very relevant to see like the amount of conversations that the year after making this installation, high-level politicians were starting to have within the room. And the concept of gaps of information in the political agendas started to be like actually written in the agendas of more than 200 politicians, right? And to finish up and wrap up, I wanted to just to express this idea that data by itself, it can be another language. And when Ludwig Wittgenstein was saying the limit of my language means the limit of my soul, he was not only referring to Japanese, German, English, Spanish, whatever. He was actually talking about the language as a semantic and composition of communication that can be music, or it can be artistic expressions, right? And data itself, if we start to understand it as a language itself, it can have like completely different ways to express and to transform the way we perceive reality. And nowadays we have such a blank page on the way we express information, with such an opportunity to express in different ways, that I truly believe that designers have still a responsibility in how to go beyond the infographics into a space where we can actually create bridges and empathy and connections that can make us feel much deeper towards the reality we're living today. And that's a bit it. Thank you very much.
Fabulous. Thanks so much for sharing the work of your studio and deep dive into a very important project. Gives us a lot to contemplate in your approach and the philosophy of the group. I wanted to open the discussion to everyone here to see if someone here has a follow-up question that they would like to pose to Pau. You can raise your hand and you can ask with video and voice, or you can do it just with text. But really need to open up the floor, as it were, to see if anyone has a follow-up question about the projects that you've shown, or the kind of work that you like to take on as a group, the kinds of clients that you seek out or that seek out you, maybe questions about how you kind of found yourself in this role. How did you form, how did this group come together, and how do you sustain and nourish the group? Because you yourself opened the talk with how you struggled to even have a self-definition, which we can relate to that, I think, in design and technology. Sort of the minute that you define yourself, you risk becoming obsolete, and it's better to exist in a space that resists the definition so that you can be what you would want to be, as opposed to what you have agreed to be. So we can relate to that, but maybe we could talk about that. But I do see some questions now popping in as I'm chatting. So Pau, why don't you take a second to look at these three questions that we have here, and
what's
we,
your
we
educational okay, what's your educational background and how did you become interested in this area? I studied graphic design. I was a terrible graphic designer. And then I started to feel more interest for other fields. So I come from a university that is an engineering university. Even if I was studying graphic design, I didn't study or specialized in graphic design until very late in my career. So for the first 3 years, I was studying a more technical approach to industrial design and product design. And I truly think that kind of created an impact in the way we like kind of build up on domestic, as we were creating like this kind of tension between data, something that is very objective and feels like very scientific, and it's a language that normally is used as a language of authority. And then in the other space, the artistic expressions that we use to actually express information and design. So I think I always had like this kind of will to further develop the artistic exploration, but because the very technical perspectives that we had at the university, we had like this kind of routing for a more objective way to understand the world, right? And then I see.
Yeah, you can follow up with
Yeah. Let's do
the other
first one.
questions which are up on the scroll, but they're similar in terms of asking you about how you deal with certain kinds of clients, such as Arden's question, and then question from Matthias about medium and presentation.
Yeah, well, look, this question is really interesting, the one that popped out right now. For the first project that you shared, the one with the sun, I was wondering if the team first got consent from the audience before visualizing it with sun, or how your team seeks to use ethical data in your current and future data-driven works as well. Well, like this is a big part of the work that we are doing right now. So we are like, let's say 80% of our work is focused on artificial intelligence and artificial intelligence didactics. And that's mainly telling people what not to do, right? In that case, the whole project was a didactic project because we don't have to ask for consent when you are in a private space. You are actually being recorded in most of the private spaces, and that museum as a private space was recorded. So we were just actually underlying some of the power dynamics that appear to happen in these spaces that are surveilling the activity and the behaviors of the public. Actually, we were the ones that wanted to disclose the information of the cameras to the audience, because otherwise it was just kept for the people from the museum, right? So I think there is a lot of our work that is focused on how to make visible like these systems that normally are invisible and the unethical uses of information and data. Then I see, I wonder, how did you find all the clients? Well, at the beginning, we didn't find any clients. It was projects that we were doing by ourselves. So we were actually doing collaborations with small galleries. As I came from a graffiti background, I was invited to different graffiti festivals, and we were using that as a platform to create small installations. And it was not until a year and a half that we were doing all these experiments that we started to be requested to do these projects and installations in a more formal and commercial way. And it was quite hard for us to make the jump from experimental, doing whatever we wanted, how we wanted, in the way we wanted, and having our own jobs in other stuff, and then jumping into like full on the project and just like having to deal with the request of a commercial limitation, right? And right now what we have is a space for a lot of research and exploration, and let's say 80% of our projects that are commercial, so are client based. And the ways that we have to, like, we don't have a sales department or anything like this. We just, like, we have been working for 10 years. So now, like, the clients recommend the work we do between them. And then because we have some visibility online, and we have like people publish articles, and we do a lot of talks and lectures. So like, I don't know exactly how people and clients get to us, but they really do. What else?
There's a question from Sumi asking for more explanation on how the personalized music might have worked.
Okay, 3, 2, 1, 10. When they were the astronaut. So we like actually developed everything with Max MSP, and what we did was an interface, an application, like simple one, a front, where you will be actually answering all these questions, and with each answer, it was triggering a sound that was added into the queue of sound. So we were creating kind of an infinite loop of a song that was adding more music into it, right? At the end, it was a sample, and we created like samples per each potential answer. and we had like this kind of matrix of potential answers that they could do with all the different paths. And it was overlapping all the different samples until they got like the personalized one. That's the mechanic. I thought it was like very complex to do until we did it. And then it resulted to be quite easy. Well, quite easy. We spent 2 months working on this, but it's not that complex. And nowadays it's much less complex than when we did it. Now that you have a lot of software that you can do similar things with this. And I see another question. How do you decide on a medium or mix of mediums to present a specific data set so the visualization generates the most impact possible? That's also a very good question. So we tend to do an exercise that is actually trying to understand which is the basis of the message that we want to send, right? It's not on the data set. The data set by itself is like just another material. But what is important for us is what is the message, right? So, for example, we were doing this exhibition on food waste. We had a lot of stats and data on food waste. So for us, there was a possibility that was, let's create a whole exhibition with food waste. But then we say, no. We really want the people to understand in the right environments when it's happening, right? So what we created was like this whole exhibition that had a first moment where you will go through a supermarket and all the products of the supermarket, the fridge, everything was actually visualizing information, right? So we kind of hacked a supermarket to become an exhibition to talk about food waste. But then another part of the exhibition was the kitchen, what you do in your home, how you cook. And then another one, it was the table, what do you eat and what you don't, right? And at the very end, of course, there was like the garbage can, recycled can, and so on. And by doing so, what we were doing is, okay, how we can bring a topic that is complex, that have a lot of statistics, of very technical statistics, and bring to the homes of people, like bring it to a language that feels very familiar, that feels something that I could be talking to any of my friends or my parents or like anyone from all kinds of different levels of understanding of this problematic. And then I see.
Think we've addressed the outstanding questions. I guess the only one that might need a follow-up, I guess, is the first question from Arden about specifying works for politicians rather than general public, and the differences between political spaces.
Yeah, I think the main difference is that whenever we work with big audiences and public, we try to be very open. So we play a lot with the performativity of what we are doing and placing the audience as the main character. While when we work with politicians or high-level decision makers, we try to hide it. We try to give more privacy and also isolate them. Right? The case of the time machine is a good example of this, because they are performing already, like politicians, they are performing all the time. And of course, they will smile in front of an installation if it's full of people. But what you really want them to, if you want to impact them, you don't want anyone to be looking at them, right? So that's a bit the difference on one side and the other. And yes, we seek a lot of spaces where we can have more direct impact on decision makers that sometimes is not a political decision maker, sometimes are more corporate ones. So we work a lot at the Mobile World Congress, that is like the CES in Las Vegas, is like one of the biggest tech shows. And we always try to integrate like big ethical and questions about the problematics of the impact of big tech in the world, from a geological perspective to human labor perspective to a more political one. And of course, it's a complex thing to do, but people really engage. When you don't say, this is my statement, when you just open like the whole conversation through questions, it's much easier, right? And I think that's another point that is important from the work, of the last 10 years is that we have come to realize that the starting point is always a question, which is the question that we want to ask, but the end point, like for us, a success is whenever someone gets out from an exhibition, an installation, a campaign, a project with a question in their minds, a question that can bring to a dinner next week with some friends, right? But having this question live with them.
There's one more, there's another new question there about inspiration and implementation.
How do you find inspiration and process of implementing it? Is through a topic of interest and then find a data set, or let the data set guide you? So this is not, we don't have a fixed methodology. Sometimes there are clients that say, hey, we have all these data sets, what you can tell from this. And then there is some other times that we want to actually create a narrative, and we find the data sets to build up this narrative, right? Still, and there are moments that we don't have a narrative, neither data set, and we have to just explore and see, okay, what comes up from this. And in terms of inspiration, it comes from all places, like from theater plays, from a lot of work of plastic artists, and I think that's mostly it. And of course, we do a lot of experimentation in the studio with different materials, with different kinds of production, and with digital production too. Now with artificial intelligence, that is most of the experimentation that we are doing. It's truly like a game changer for designers, because it's capable of automatize a lot of the experimental processes that for us were taking a lot of time.
Pau, I wanted to ask, to follow up a question about this concept where people in the public view, politicians in particular, have a unique need for privacy because they've basically, sacrificed their privacy to be a public figure, but that paradox is itself potentially an obstacle, and the time machine is deliberately trying to recreate a lost privacy for a public figure. So we see that dynamics very interesting, and indeed probably public figures have so few private moments like that the scarcity or rarity of such an experience is for them is quite, has a big effect on that very narrow but unique and powerful target audience. My question is, have you been doing work or thinking about the question of privacy for the ordinary person who may have an anxiety about data but doesn't necessarily fully understand consequences or implications?
So for example, something that we started to do was in the last big projects that we have been doing, you can actually interact directly through like physical devices, artifacts, installations from all kinds, but you can actually do it from your phone, right? And this is something that enables the possibility of privacy, still giving the opportunity to participate to people, right? And I think that has been an interesting space where we have explored that. Still giving that opportunity, most of the people, when you give the space, like the physical space, to interact and be part of something, most of the people still want to be part of something, like want to interact, want to touch it. And of course, it's very different in different regions of the world. We did like this project last December in Hong Kong, and it was the whole contrary thing. Everyone wanted to interact digitally, and they were a bit scared about touching and interacting like with the artifacts and installations that we were doing. So most of the people wanted to do everything from their phone. That is where they felt more secure. And also it has a lot to do with the perception of privacy. So in China and Hong Kong, in this case, it's a total different perception than the one that we have in Europe or even in the States, of course. So this also changes a lot when we talk about data and any kind of technology that is based on recording information of your own. Like the relationship that you have as audience also is switched and is understood from a different perspective.
Yeah, for sure. Do we have other people who would like to make a comment or a question relate to a topic or a reference point? Want to make sure that we have granted everyone a chance to explore this group's work. I wondered if you could, in the last couple of minutes that we have, you could describe who else is in the group in terms of their roles and their contributions. Like, how does a team come together, and how does the different disciplines of the team intersect?
So we have different divisions. One, we call it concept, and people there comes from research, journalism, design, right? And then we have another, and this division is specifically focused on the creative direction of projects and the research and content. Then we have another division that is focused on design and architecture, product design. So is like the disciplines that are more technical. So we have architects and engineers and product designers who build up the stuff. And then we have a digital division who is mainly working on front and back end and all the like code behind the projects. And then we have another division that is tech, that is actually like the physical part of technology, right? So that will be electronics, that will be robotics, that will be like any part of an installation or a project that actually is moving and that needs any kind of input and output, right? And then we have, of course, managers that come from all kinds of like discipline, from art history to economics to psychology even, and really they are the ones that are kind of keeping the boat ahead all the time and deciding both in timings and a bit of the direction of the project. And that's it. That's a bit it, how we build it. And like at the very beginning, we were coming from psychology. The discipline from the original team was psychology, architecture, and design, graphic design and product design.
And you mentioned journalism as well, in terms of who's on the core research team.
Yeah.
What is the quality of the journalist that you find very important in this role?
I think it have something that also have a lot to do with psychology. That is to ask the right question, right, and to understand it. So I think, as I said before, the questions are kind of the guiding principles of the most of the projects we do. So asking the right questions for a concept is part of the like approach and values that I think journalists bring to the table when working with designers in that sense.
And my last question, making sure that there aren't any other remaining student questions, there's still time. But my last question is more reflecting on the past 10 years. If you have observed any shifts in the public consciousness over the general question or sentiment around data, that is, I could be more direct and say, 10 years ago, when you started work, did people ask, why are you worried about data? Or did they have a kind of maybe limited or maybe naive view of the question? And then 10 years later, have you observed a way in which people generally have changed their own ideas or views about data and approach you differently over the 10 years around the topic? Have you noticed a change, basically?
Of course, I think at least in Europe, it's very clear that like 10 years ago, no one was giving a shit about data and information and privacy. And nowadays, people is really aware of what is going on with their data. Still, there is a lot of work to do on didactics on that, but people is more cautious, is much more cautious. And whenever we are like creating an installation or a project that is gathering information, like there are always these questions now. And before it was just, yeah, let's participate, and not even what this is for, right? It's people were just like being part of this. And I think in the same way it happened with any kind of digital social media platform nowadays, right? People is starting to ask more questions, even though most of the population is still like a bit numb on that. They say, well, we have nothing to hide. Why I should worry, right? But it has been showed already for very like in lots and lots of cases, like the potential dangers that a lack of privacy can bring into people's lives.
Yes. Well, we are unfortunately out of time, Pau, but I want to thank you so much for presenting the work of the data streamers. And the domestic data streamers is a very interesting conceptual model, even on its own, separate from the subject matter. So I think all the students appreciate that. So if I could ask the students to show your appreciation to our guests, some kind of digital expression, may it be an animated emoji or something in the chat, some sign of life through our mediated system to show a data that you are in appreciation given the limited affordances of our platform here. If we were in the same room together, there would be only the real chemical feelings of joy and appreciation. So thanks. We will continue to watch for what the domestic data streamers are up to next. And I would suspect that our students will continue to look to your group for inspiration moving forward. So thanks so much for joining us today at Cloud Salon.
Thank you, Dave. And thank you everyone for the time. And if anyone is interested and wants to keep talking about it, just contact me at Domestic Streamers. We're always open to have visits also in Barcelona.
And before everyone leaves, we have a exciting update on upcoming events to be aware of, some announcements related. So the first one is, I'll put these in the chat so you all have them. The first event is Embodied Futures and the Ecology of Care, a show at the Bat Art Space. We have some affiliated folks from Parsons who are going to be at that, so don't miss that. I'm also asking you to check out a show at the Museum of the Moving Image in Queens by faculty Ava Davidova, who is teaching for DT. So check out their show. We also have another event coming in the chat on the tomorrow. We have this Zoom link as an extension of XFAB. So check out Nita Premchand tomorrow. And two more things before we're all done here in the final minutes. Don't miss Smita Sen's show opening at Drew in New Jersey, coming up in November. And then, just so you all know, back in terms of what's going on here on campus and planning for next year, believe it or not, registration for spring is going to open for all students on October 23rd at 8:30 in the morning, with early registration opening for some before that. So just wanted to give those announcements. Thanks all for joining Cloud Salon. And thanks again to Pau for joining us. And have a great rest of your week, everyone, and good luck with midterms.
Thank you very much. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye. Thank
Take
you.
care.